The polished conference table inside Pentagon Ring E vibrated with a faint metallic hum, the kind that didn't come from machinery or passing foot traffic, but from tension, human tension. The 12 senior officers seated around it were long past keeping their composure. Rank didn't matter anymore. Tempers had burned through formality. What filled the room now was panic wrapped in arrogance. The walls, soundproofed, reinforced, immovable, absorbed the roar of overlapping voices. Decorative plaques and framed commendations rattled softly, as if even they were offended by the chaos. A digital screen on the far wall blinked red with the words "Breach Report." Level Alpha repeated in unforgiving cycles. "Someone explain to me," Admiral Patrick Hale barked, palms slamming on the table, "how an entire encrypted data spine went dark without a single alarm triggered. That's not my division." Colonel Riker fired back, face flushed and eyes burning. "Your analysts were the ones monitoring the traffic." Captain Lucas Trent leaned forward, jabbing a finger across the table. "Don't you dare pin this on intelligence when your men were the ones assigned to security sweeps." Voices crashed against each other like waves in a storm. Chairs scraped, paper folders shuffled, and the polished table trembled again, just slightly, just enough to show how frayed the room had become. And yet, in all the noise, not a single one of them noticed the side door open. It didn't squeak, it didn't interrupt, it simply widened enough for a small figure to slip through. Elise Rowan stepped inside without rush, without hesitation, without the slightest tremor of uncertainty. She carried a simple metal tea tray, 2 ceramic cups, a pot, a small dish of sugar, everything placed neatly, quietly, almost reverently. Her posture was humble enough to be invisible, and that was exactly why no one looked at her. Admiral Hale, who sat closest to the door, glanced over his shoulder first. A slow smirk unfurled across his face, sharp, amused, dismissive. Seeing her there with a tea tray was like finding a stray cat wandering into an operating room. His voice cut through the argument like a whip. "Well, look at that. Did catering get lost again?" Several heads turned, shoulders relaxed, not out of comfort but out of derision. Captain Trent snorted, leaning back in his chair with an exaggerated sigh. "Wrong room, sweetheart. This is the serious end of the building." A few officers chuckled, relieved to have something easier to focus on than the breach report flashing red on the wall. Elise didn't respond. Her eyes didn't drop or flicker. She didn't blush or flinch or alter her breathing. If she heard them at all, she gave no sign. Colonel David Riker waved his hand sharply, not even bothering to look directly at her. "Okay, someone explain how random support staff walks into an alpha-level briefing. This is exactly the kind of security oversight that leads to breaches. Fix this." Laughter broke again, quick, sharp, dismissive. A few officers exchanged smug looks as if her presence validated their earlier arguments about incompetence. Another joked under his breath. "Maybe she walked in because even she realized you idiots can't handle a simple crisis." More laughter. No courtesy, no concern. Elise simply walked forward. Her steps were light, silent, almost choreographed in precision. Her shoulders were balanced, spine aligned, weight distribution even. Little details no one in the room understood well enough to notice. No one except Sergeant Mason Cole. He stood in the far corner, arms crossed, assigned to the briefing as silent security. Unlike the officers spilling ego across the table, Mason didn't look away from Elise. His expression shifted from confusion to suspicion to something colder. Her gait wasn't staff gait. Her breathing wasn't staff breathing. Her posture wasn't the posture of someone used to serving tea. It was controlled, disciplined, combat coded. She carried the tray like someone trained to carry far more dangerous things. Mason's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. He straightened slightly, boots planting deeper into the floor. A room full of high-ranking officers had written her off as a harmless nobody. Mason knew better. Something was wrong, or about to be very, very right. The laughter around the table didn't fade at once. It lingered, clinging to the polished surface like condensation. Some officers shook their heads in amusement. Others leaned back with smug satisfaction, glad to have something, anything, to deflect from the catastrophic breach none of them wanted pinned on their department. But the red alert still blinked on the wall behind them, casting faint pulses across their uniforms like a silent warning. Breach report. Level Alpha ignored, because mocking Elise was easier. Admiral Hale took a sip of his coffee, still smirking. Honestly, where do they find these people? This isn't some officer lounge. This is an Alpha-tier national security briefing. Captain Trent tapped a pen against his notepad, grin widening. She probably took a wrong turn near catering. Happens when people wander into floors above their pay grade. Another chuckle rippled across the table. Only Sergeant Mason Cole wasn't moving. He watched Elise's every motion. Not the tea tray, not the way she held the cups, but the details. The subtle shifts of muscle under her sleeves. The controlled inhale every few seconds. The fact that her eyes scanned the room not like a confused staff member, but like someone performing silent threat analysis. Mason knew body language. He had spent 12 years studying it, living it, surviving because of it. His instincts, the ones that kept him breathing through 2 deployments and a classified rescue op the Pentagon pretended never happened, didn't flicker often. But right now they were screaming. Across the table, Colonel Riker leaned back with an irritated sigh. Trent, just call someone to escort her out. She's interrupting. She hasn't said a word. Mason interrupted, surprising even himself. His voice carried across the room with unexpected weight. 12 pairs of officer eyes turned toward him. Mason rarely spoke unless spoken to. Trent raised an eyebrow. She doesn't need to say anything. She's not authorized for this room. Mason didn't look away from Elise. No offense, sir, but I don't think she wandered in here by accident. A few officers scoffed. Admiral Hale snorted. Cole, she's holding tea. She's staff. But Elise still hadn't flinched, spoken, or reacted. She simply adjusted her grip on the tray, subtly shifting to keep her weight evenly distributed. Her movements were crisp, too balanced, not a tremor, not a misstep. A civilian carrying a tray would tilt their head, glance down, make sure not to spill. Elise carried it like someone who had once carried explosives. Mason stepped forward slightly, not aggressive, just attentive. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "do you have credentials?" Before Elise could answer, Colonel Riker slammed his folder shut. "Sergeant, we are in the middle of an Alpha-level internal breach, and you're interrogating room service. Handle your post." Admiral Hale waved a hand dismissively. "He's on edge, that's all. Too many years in uniform. Comes back jumpy." More laughter. But Mason wasn't jumpy. He was calculating. He noticed the tiny mark on Elise's wrist when she shifted the tray. Barely visible, barely even a mark. More like the ghost of a symbol, faded over time, not ink. Not tattooed for fashion, nothing decorative. It was a classification mark he had only seen once before, a long time ago, and never on someone who delivered tea. Mason's stomach tightened. Before he could speak again, Elise finally moved, not to answer, not to step back, but to set the tray down at the edge of the conference table. And in that moment, something shifted in the room, not dramatically, not with force, just enough. Her hands never trembled. Her breathing stayed level. Her gaze swept the table with a quiet confidence none of the officers detected as confidence, but Mason did. Her silence wasn't fear. It was control. the kind of control that isn't taught in catering or support staff training. It was the kind of stillness held by someone who had learned to erase their presence when needed and reveal it only when necessary. Captain Trent rolled his eyes. Just great. Now she's setting up a tea service in the middle of an emergency briefing. But Admiral Hale leaned forward, narrowing his eyes slightly. Wait, she walked right through that coded side entrance. Trent shrugged. Maybe someone left it unlocked. No, Mason said quietly, it unlocks only from the inside, and only for authorized clearance badges within 2 feet. The entire room froze. For the first time since Elise had entered, absolute silence fell over the table. The blinking red alert on the screen suddenly felt much louder. Elise lifted her eyes, and for the very first time she spoke. Elise's voice arrived softly, calm, steady, unhurried, but in the tense silence of the briefing room, it might as well have been a gunshot. Your door wasn't unlocked, she said. I opened it. Murmurs erupted instantly. Confusion, disbelief, irritation. Admiral Hale frowned deeply, tapping his fingers on the table. Opened it with what? A catering badge. Elise met his eyes without blinking. With my clearance. Colonel Riker scoffed, loud and dismissive. You don't have clearance for anything above sub-basement level, sweetheart. Don't play games in a room where you don't belong. Elise didn't look offended, and that was what unsettled Mason the most. People insulted don't stay that calm. People exposed don't stay that controlled. People hiding nothing don't stare down senior officers without blinking, but Elise did. She clasped her hands in front of her, posture flawless. I was asked to attend this briefing. I arrived exactly when I was meant to. By who? Captain Trent demanded, leaning forward as if preparing to pounce on her answer. She paused, not in hesitation, but calculation. Then, that information is classified. The room exploded. Classified? Who does she think she is? This is ridiculous. Somebody drag her out. Admiral Hale raised a hand sharply, silencing the outburst. He studied her with squinted eyes now, not amused, not mocking, but finally curious. That shift alone was monumental. Hale didn't look at enlisted personnel with curiosity. He didn't look at staff like they had a single valuable thing to say. He was looking at Elise like a man who had overlooked something important. Sergeant Cole, Hale said slowly, you said she couldn't have entered through that door without clearance. Explain. Mason stepped forward. He kept his voice steady, but inside his chest, his pulse was pounding against old memories he had buried deep. The side entrance to Ring E is triple. Locked, he said. You need a coded badge, tier, 3 biometrics, and an encrypted access token that refreshes every 12 hours. Only Black Level authorization has that. Several officers jolted upright. Black Level wasn't a rumor, it was a ghost. Something whispered about in passing by people who pretended not to believe it existed. Captain Trent shook his head. No way, she's too young. Colonel Riker scoffed. This is absurd. She's staff. Elise tilted her head slightly. I'm not staff. Mason's jaw tightened. He already knew. He had known the moment he saw her balance her weight like a covert operator, not a server. He had known when he recognized the faint mark on her wrist, the faded imprint that matched the classification he remembered from a classified rescue op years ago, but it was one thing to suspect, another to hear her confirm it. Hale leaned closer. If you're not staff, then who sent you here, and why? Elise drew in a slow breath. This briefing involves a level alpha breach. Your systems failed to detect the intrusion. Your analysts didn't catch it. Your automated traps didn't slow it down. All 12 of you have spent the last 40 minutes arguing about who to blame. Her eyes, calm and unwavering, swept across the table. No one here has the tools to resolve it. It wasn't an insult. It was a fact, stated plainly, a cold one, the kind that makes the ego shrink away. Colonel Riker clenched his fists. "Excuse me, do you have any idea who you're talking to?" "Yes," she replied, "and none of you have the clearance to know who you're talking to. You could have dropped a pin on the polished floor and heard it echo." Captain Trent's face reddened. "You're out of line." Elise finally stepped back, not submissively, but with deliberate distance, like someone preparing to reveal a deeper truth. "I was activated 40 minutes ago," she said. "Activated for what?" Mason asked quietly. Her gaze landed on him, not harsh, not commanding, but acknowledging him as the only person in the room who had truly understood the depth of what she was. "To contain the breach," she answered. Hale frowned. "Contain? We haven't even identified the source yet." "That's because," Elise said, "you're looking in the wrong direction." The digital screen flickered. For the first time since the meeting began, the red alert shifted. Not in text, something deeper. The system was reacting, adjusting, responding to something inside the room. Elise's eyes flicked upward, and Mason realized something no one else had noticed yet. She hadn't glanced upward to see the screen. She had predicted exactly when it would change. Hale's voice cracked. "Rowan, what exactly are you?" Elise looked at him, and for the first time there was no silence, no soft politeness, no quiet mask. Only the truth. "I'm the reason the building hasn't gone dark yet."